Okay, well, good morning, everybody. I want to pick up on what Rick's been saying. He's given quite a marketing perspective on products and services for aging population. What I'd like to do is make it very design-centric. Just a little bit about the Royal College of Art. You're probably wondering, why is an art school in this debate? 70% of what we do is actually design, all the design disciplines, from architecture right the way through to vehicle design, fashion, textiles, product, and so on. And we're a community entirely postgraduate with a lot of researchers. Average age of a student is 28. And we have an illustrious history. We were the first art school in the world. Originally, in 1836, we were founded as the Government School of Design. And one of the founders, Henry Cole, invented the Christmas card, so you have my institution to blame for that. And what's interesting, if you read Dickens, Dickens satirizes the Government School of Design, but it did become the Royal College of Art, and Queen Victoria sent her daughter there. Originally she thought she was going to send her to do watercolour painting, and was disgusted and shocked to learn that her daughter was doing sculpture, which involved spending all day sketching naked men. And she tried to pull her out of the Royal College of Art, but the college refused. A constitutional crisis ensued, but her daughter did get her degree. Since then, there have been many famous alumni down the years. Probably our most famous design innovator in relation to this audience is James Dyson, who is now just overtaken Hoover in America as the #1 vacuum cleaner manufacturer. And both Garrick and I have a relationship with James, and he's just one of a number of very famous alumni from the college. What's interesting is that we're a young, kind of thrusting, creative community, but the needs of aging population, older people, has been a fixation, an interest of the college since the early 90s, when we set up a program called Design Age. And since then we've been working on research, consulting with industry, and looking really at the needs of this emerging audience. And I won't go into the demographics, it's all very much been covered. Well, what's interesting from a design perspective is the sheer nature of the challenge. And I don't want to rib Rick, but aging, I think, as we age, we change. From my perspective, these changes aren't all good. And aging population isn't all about kayaking and skydiving and cycling, and it's about what the medics would call minor multiple impairment. And the three areas, sensory, motion, and cognitive gradual impairment, are real challenges for designers to overcome. And traditionally, what the approach has been for older and disabled people has been what we call the medical model of design. Give them special needs design. Give them aids and appliances which are clunky and stigmatizing. And what we have practiced, and what a great many people in Europe are now behind, is a much more socially inclusive approach to design, which includes older people. So far from the mythology of brand advertising, where you get these ads which show older people with silver hair, with the sunset behind them, looking fit and healthy, and everything's wonderful. This is a photograph taken by a student of mine of his grandmother, who is trying to cook a ready meal, and she's using a magnifying glass. Packaging is the #1 nightmare of design for an aging population, as Rick rightly pointed out. And if you just take one of the many multiple impairments, vision impairment, you can design a great product, and designers tend to be young and fit, and this is how your audience is seeing your product. This is a pressure washer, and this is how, and we show this a lot to the industrial companies we consult with and do research with. What your audience of older people is seeing is very different from what your designers think they've actually produced. And there has traditionally been a real disconnect. Why has there been a disconnect? And Jane talked very eloquently yesterday about moving away from one size fits all. Well, I will name the culprit. His name, one of the great godfathers of American industrial design, his name is Henry Dreyfuss. In the 20th century, he was a colossus. He did a lot of work for John Deere tractors and Polaroid. And he also wrote a book that was very, very influential. It was called The Measure of Man. It was published in 1960, and it became the standard work worldwide on anthropometrics, fitting people to their physical environment. And what Dreyfus did was very simple. He took thousands of men, women and children, and he measured them. He measured the length of their arms, their grip, their size and their weight, their physical characteristics, and then he aggregated all the measurements, and then he divided them by the number of people he'd collected the measurements from. And out of that he came up with average types. And he came up with your average Joe. This is where average Joe comes from. Joe, and there was average Josephine, and there was average Joe Jr. And designers all over the world, in the UK, in America, in Europe, and then the Far East would look at the anthropometric data, the average size of a door, the average size of a seat on a bus, the average weight of something that you could lift if you were an average type. And what if you were left-handed or colorblind or pregnant or with a broken leg or over 55? You missed out because you weren't the average type. So a lot of people were being excluded from mass market design. And in a sense, targeting the average, and the marketing industry picked up on it, that if you go to the center of the spectrum of capability, if you go to the center and you design for that thing in the center, you will have a market. You will, if you go right for the average type, you will maybe have 3 or 4 rings. What's happened in recent years, and we have been very much part of this general drift, is you don't work from the center out, from the average type. You work from the margins in. You design from the margins. And this is a fundamental shift in both design and marketing thinking. You design for the worst case scenario. You design for the person who is, in an airport, if you're trying to design a signing system, design for the person with a visual impairment. If you make it work for them, you will automatically make it work for everybody else. Common sense. But this is only recently there's been this cultural shift. Because if you design for people on the margins of capability, then you will automatically capture the people on the inner rings. And this is the kind of thinking. And increasingly, people have begun to talk not so much about special needs design for older people, but they've begun to talk about inclusive design, including people. And this is very important. And in the UK now, we have a special government definition of inclusive design. A process whereby designers and architects ensure their products, environments, services address the needs of the widest possible audience. So inclusive design is incredibly important, moving away from a medical to a social model. And here's just a few examples of exemplars of inclusive design. Oxo Good Grips, you will know them. They're an American, originally designed for arthritics. The designer Smart Design and the entrepreneur Sam Faber worked with the Arthritis Society of America to design a better potato peeler using this special material, Santoprene. They designed what they thought was a special needs product for arthritics. People loved it. Everybody wanted a better potato peeler. So what happened became a mass market product, very successful. The Air and Chair, the office chair of choice, Herman Miller, designed by Chadwick and Strum, in the dot-com boom, every young trendy office had to have this chair. It was originally designed for older people with lower back pain. That's how they did all their research and came up with a special material from the aerospace industry. They were working with older users. They wanted to solve a problem for older workers. Everyone wants a more comfortable chair, an inclusive product. This is one of my favorites. This was designed in Britain by BT, British Telecom, with the Royal National Institute for the Blind. This was a phone for visually impaired people with giant black and white buttons. It became the second best-selling handset on the British market in 6 months. Everyone wanted a phone. People thought it was great. Students, when they've come in after a night drinking and need to ring their mum or dial for a pizza, this absolutely worked perfectly. And the Ford Focus, top-selling saloon of its type in Europe, absolutely designed. Average age of the design team, 27. They looked at the demographics, as Rick said. Average age of a new car buyer, 45. Average age of a sports car buyer, 55. And they wore these third-age suits from Loughborough University in the UK, which enabled them to actually simulate what it was like to be older, to get inside the shoes of an older person. And I went to a presentation on the Ford Focus, and one of the directors of Ford said, you know, we've not had a single complaint from a younger person that the dials are too easy to read or it's too easy to get in and out of the car, which is quite a nice way of talking about inclusive design. So I know I've got 2 minutes now just to give you a couple of very fundamental principles on 2 minutes on some very basic principles on designing for older people, to include them rather than to stigmatize them. The first and most important principle is simplicity. I know yesterday Professor Arango said, you know, you should look for simplicity and then distrust it. I don't think you should distrust simplicity. We live in a complex, over-elaborated, stressful world, and simplicity is incredibly important to this market. We've talked a lot about phones. On your right is the new Vodafone Easy Phone, which we did some research on, but it still has a screen, and I don't think it's that easy. We came up with our own Easy Phone, which is a clam shape, which doesn't have a screen at all, because the research that we did said that people didn't want a screen, didn't want to text, they just wanted an ordinary traditional phone that was in a mobile clam format, and that's what we did. Have we got it on the market? No, we haven't, because there are some powerful vested interests in having screens. No stigma. Go to a social model rather than a medical model. This is the standard NHS, National Health Service crutch that are handed out in their thousands to older people. We remodeled it using carbon fibre, sports styling, to make it a piece of sports equipment that people might want to walk around with rather than something which stigmatizes them. Insight into lifestyle is about avoiding stereotypes. We did a piece of research that talked about yo-yos. We found that older people are not set in one mindset or mode. They swing dramatically between making safe options and then going for things which are sensual and racy and adapting to their lifestyle, especially in choice of cars. And we call them the yo-yo generation, young, old, young, old. They're kind of oscillating between different positions. They've seen a lot. We also call them the seesaw generation. They've already seen a lot, and they're going to see a lot in the future as well. And epitomized by this kind of artwork where the young modern horse is looking at the traditional racing scene. And in the bathroom industry, you can see that. The bathroom industry now is moving away from non-stick, non-slip pads and grip rails to make sensual environments, but are just safer and easier to use. Ease of use, we've talked about that a lot. I won't go on, but making things lighter, easier to use, one-button operation. Cooking is a real problem. Once you've filled a heavy pan with water, how do you get it to the cooker? Basic things like that. We've been doing a lot of basic ergonomic work in that area. Time is up. Low tech for support for health. This is a thing called Popper. There's so much emphasis on telecare and new technology and sensors and computers. We haven't got the basics right in terms of helping people to take things out of pills out of blister packs, or even getting the packaging right on drugs in hospitals so that nurses and doctors don't make the mistakes that they do. Technology as a servant and not as a determinist thing that you've got to chase and follow. We're doing a lot of work in the car industry around could the dashboard be a piece of software? Could it be a digital display as opposed to a piece of hardware? And that would solve a lot of the problems around information display, and we're working with Visteon in that area. Safer urban space. Could we redesign our streets, our bus stops, our parks, and access to work, which we've talked a lot about. Lots of opportunities there for an environment which is welcoming, a physical environment that is designed to encourage people to want to stay at work longer. And that involves interactive lighting and opportunities for oral history to share across the multi-generational workplace information. So I'm afraid it's a whistle-stop tour through a really fascinating, rich design area, but I hope it's given you some food for thought. And if you want to read more, have a look at our website. www.hhcrca.ac.uk has all our research projects with older people on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.